Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is video 26 from the Beginner to Chess Master playlist, which is a progressive series of videos. And yes, it's been a while. Those of you that have been tracking this playlist closely, it's nearly 6 months since the last video, but I certainly have not forgotten about this series. This video here will be the third and final installment of the basic checkmate patterns. I will be sharing 9 patterns with you. You can see them listed on the right. 24 total examples, and as usual, I am pulling these, just as I did in the past 2 videos, pulling them from leechess.org/practice. So feel free to maybe try them on your own first if you would like. I'll have a link in the description. So let's just hop right to it. The great majority of these examples are super quick, and I'll just, along the way, provide any visual aids that I think would be, useful to your own game. So this first one here, noted as the opera mate. Basically, when you give mate to your opponent's king when he's on the back rank, and it's the combined effort of both rook and bishop. So notice the intersection square, and it's the rook that simply sweeps down with the support of the bishop in this case for mate. Number 2 for the opera mate, a little bit more involved, but not so much that we can't work this one out. Giving up the queen, and then once again we can note this little pattern of the rook and bishop delivering mate. Third and final one for the opera mate. This one's a cool one. Kicking off first with a pretty unexpected move, actually. Queen to f1. There's only one reply, and now we have this cool double check. Only one reply, and yet again we can see this intersection square, the bishop and rook doing the trick for the opera mate. Moving on now to Anderson's mate. How to summarize Anderson's mate? It's when you have a bishop or pawn supporting one of your major pieces to deliver mate on the back rank. So clearly here we're going to give mate like so. Example 2 for Anderson's mate. We want to get our queen here, and we could do that in a few moves. There's only this silly move to block us, but we will not be stopped from getting here on our next turn. That's mate. And one last example for Anderson's mate. This one's actually the most sophisticated of them all for this particular video. If you'd like to, go ahead, pause the video, see if you can work out this checkmate pattern. It's a little bit sophisticated. Okay, just going to provide the solution now. Kicking off first with knight to e7. Note that if the king moves, queen takes rook on the very next move is game over. So after this move, queen takes knight, and now we have this cool move, queen takes h7. It's really, in the end, all of these pieces are really focusing in on the king position. That pawn is pinned. We can make use of that fact. The king must go to g8, and once more we see the rook and bishop doing the trick in this final position for Anderson's mate. Moving on now to Dovetail Mate. Funny name. This is when you position your queen right next to the king, and he is, your queen is 1 square diagonal from that king. So right here, we're going to have mate on the spot. And notice that when you position your queen right next to the enemy king like this, and she is on a light square, she's taking away all light squares that the king can potentially run away to. So there's only 2 dark squares that he could run away to, and those squares are along a file or rank. So that's what you get when you strike at the king along a diagonal like this. He can either go on a file or rank. So it's a little visual thing. Queen to c3, that's the ball game. Another example of Dovetail Mate. In this case, we can position the queen on this dark square once more, striking at the king along a diagonal. he could only look to go to one of these two, but the pieces are in the way. So these right here are examples of dovetail mates. It could also be the case that, the enemy king is not obstructed by his own pieces, but we have these squares under our control. Not the case in this one, though. Queen f6 is mate. And this one is a little bit sophisticated. If you could kind of foresee one day the king being forced to this square, and we can somehow get our queen here, we would have another case where the king is going to be mated, and that's eventually what happens with this puzzle. It's a checkmate in 4, kicking off with bishop takes pawn, and then we have queen here. It's a little bit involved. Check, check, and finally we get to go here for mate. So a queen right next to the king, super powerful, taking away a ton of squares. At most, the king will only have 2 options, assuming, the queen can't be captured safely. And this is the last example of the dovetail mate. And right here, the king is not obstructed. We could go here after queen to d1. That's going to be mate. Once again, positioning the queen 1 square diagonal from the king, and these 2 are taken away. If you recall from previous basic checkmate patterns video, this specific example is similar to the Balestra mate. Okay, moving on now to what's noted as the Swallowtail Mate. Similar to dovetail, except the queen is now positioned right next to the king along a file or rank. And notice that when you're striking at the king like this, he could only try to escape now along a diagonal. So it's kind of flipped. That's just made on the spot. And one last example for Swallowtail's mate is positioning the queen like so for mate. And a cool one, this is noted as Epaulette Mate. 3 examples here. The rooks are blocking the king. That's ball game. And okay, this one's a little bit more elaborate. King can't go to these 2. We have the knight and bishop taking away these 2. And if only we could get our rook, queen, or rook here for mate, well, this one is ruled out. We can't really go here safely. But we can sack our rook and force bishop takes rook and now sneak over here. And this right here is, I don't know, it's like a long distance mate. Surprisingly enough, there's no good move for Team White. No way to block and nowhere to run. That's checkmate. And one last one for the Epaulette Mate. These are all taken away, and we're probably seeing the pattern by now. These guys are just in the king's way. Queen d7, and that is game over. Moving on to what's noted as Suffocation Mate. This is the last 4 patterns now. Suffocation, in this case, we're referring to the bishop and knight coordinating well to deliver the mate. The bishop is taking away squares, and the knight, in this case, is the one who's delivering checkmate. This one here is starting off with the bishop check. King is very restricted, and now we have a little bit of a rook move involved, let's say. And there's 2 different approaches from this position. You could play rook g3 or knight to e7 first. On knight to e7, queen takes is forced, and then rook here is mate. Or we can start with rook here, forcing queen takes rook, and then we have the knight and bishop doing the trick for this one. Greco's mate is next, and this is one of the more practical examples, just from my experience. If you're an experienced player watching this video now, I'm sure you could attest to this specific mate, the Greco mate. It's the bishop is helping out, take away one of the squares right next to the king. There's a friendly enemy pawn that is, well, really not so friendly for black in this case. And we need only to place a major piece somewhere now along a file. So we're all familiar with a back rank checkmate. A Greco's mate, maybe another way to view that is like an edge file mate is maybe how you would want to see the Greco's mate. And that's what we have with Queen to H5. And building on that same idea for Greco's mate in this example, a knight sacrifice, and once more, the rook now coming over here for mate. And one last example, and this one's definitely gets my vote for the coolest one in this video. Double check, check on G6, and now pawn takes knight, discover check, and now rook takes queen in the end will be mate. What do you think of that one? I really like that one. That one's definitely really cool. Next, just one example here for Legal's mate. No, nothing more to it than just this little configuration. It's an opening trap. Just wanted to show this one real quick. Knight to D5. And yeah, all the squares are taken away from the king. You could look up on YouTube Legal's mate, and yeah, you'll see this many videos out there covering this Legal's mate. And last, we have Vukovic mate. 3 examples. And yeah, this is another very good one, just like Greco's mate. This one here, yeah, Greco's mate is very practical. This one, same story. Rook and knight involved, and one other piece that supports the rook. So in this case, the bishop will be supporting the rook. Once he's on that E7 square, we're going to have mate, but in other cases it could also be maybe a pawn here or even a king here that are supporting a move like rook to E7 for mate. So the knight really fulfills the role of restricting, and then that rook is the one that comes in and drops the final hammer for checkmate in this case. And moving on to second mate. This is a checkmate in 3. I'll just throw it to you. If you want to pause the video and work this checkmate in 3 out, feel free to do that. Okay, the checkmate in 3 here, once again highlighting Vukovic's mate, is first knight to A7. And let me point out that after this check, if the king goes here, we go to this square. And if the king goes to the corner, we would basically have then, well, many different types of mates, a back rank mate, or even a type of Arabian mate that was already covered in previous videos. But after this check, the king goes here. Now the knight goes here, giving check and defending the rook. And finally, we're seeing that the king is the one who's now assisting rook to F2 for mate in this case. And one last example. This one here is a mate in 2 with knight to F6 and simply rook to G6. And that's really going to do it. This is, as mentioned, the 3rd and final installment of the basic checkmate patterns. As usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. And I will catch you hopefully a lot sooner for video number 27 in this playlist. So that's all for now. Hope you're having a great day, and I'll catch you soon. Take care. Bye.